Mr. Pereira, how long it takes to recover them?
So we need to secure that we have independent judges, but also professional ones. I think for a good asset recovery mechanism and process, you need the crime to be investigated as soon as possible from the moment it took place.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. Mr. Pereira and Mr. Radu, the first question will be about the asset recovery process. How different is Moldova's process according to international practices? Mr. Radu.
Thank you. I think Moldova is not so different as regard to the legal standards, because Moldova ratified different international conventions, I guess the United Nations Convention Against Corruption or Council of Europe conventions, and implements all sorts of legal standards that are in line with the European Union standards as regards to asset recovery.
I fully agree with what you said. I think that Moldova has met largely the technical requirements to engage in the asset recovery process, and you've mentioned perhaps some of the legal shortcomings that are being reviewed and are being perfected over time. The issue here is the effectiveness of that system, or in other words, do the players, do the different actors that engage in the asset recovery process, do they understand their role? Do they understand the tools that are available to them? Do they understand the steps that need to be taken to engage with those tools to reach an intended outcome in their investigations or in their prosecutions? So, like Radu said, this is not a question of legal reform, in my opinion, but much more a question of implementing what already exists to then verify its actual effectiveness.
To be honest, Pedro, some tools may be novel also to some European Union countries or to other jurisdictions. So I guess it's kind of natural that these new tools in Moldovan legislation to be seen skeptical maybe at the beginning. So I think the information, the explanation that these tools are validated at international level, for instance, interlocutory set or other types of instruments, were reviewed, for instance, by European Court of Human Rights. Confiscation also was reviewed by European Court of Human Rights, and all these instruments are validated by practice, because there may be in Moldova this kind of reluctance to new instruments by judges, by prosecutors who maybe were taught the old school.
It's a change or a shift in culture and, well, not so much policy, because the policy is slowly shifting, but it's more related to the investigation culture. So as a criminal investigation officer within the context of a criminal investigation body, I am taught to investigate and identify the criminal and collect evidence to prove the suspect's guilt. I am not trained to identify assets that may have been generated by the commission of that offense. And so, of course, we also need to start understanding that and shifting the culture so that criminal investigation bodies conduct the parallel financial investigations, that prosecutors understand that the evidence that is provided is not just to prove the commission of a crime, but it is also to identify, freeze, seize assets for the purpose of their confiscation, and for judges to also understand in the course of their judgments that it is not just about demonstrating guilt of the suspect, but it is also a matter of removing those criminal assets from them.
Do Moldovan prosecutors or judges understand all those things, Mr. Pereira?
It's always very difficult to generalize because it would be unfair to make a general statement concerning all judicial authorities, so all prosecutors and all judges. I think that specialized prosecutors have a much better understanding. There are certainly some judges that I have had the privilege to meet that also understand, and they're largely in Chisinau. But once you are out of Chisinau or you are dealing with the Prosecutor General's office, I would not be able to definitively say that they are well trained in parallel financial investigations and the purpose of a parallel financial investigation. That is not to say that the Prosecutor General office has not issued guidance and standard operating procedures on that topic. But it is one thing to issue an instruction, another thing it is to understand and apply that instruction. I would be able to say that certainly not all prosecutors and judges are fully up to speed with regards to parallel financial investigation. But there are some that are very specialized and have a very good understanding of that.
Most of the judges and the prosecutors from Chisinau, they're coming from the other side of the country. Why do they do a good job here in Chisinau, coming from the other sides, but not there? Why do they work? Why they work get better when they get in Chisinau?
This is I think a much broader question of performance, because we see poor performance in the territory and better performance in Chisinau. Maybe it relates to the means they have. Maybe in the territory they don't have all the means necessary to do their work. And I'm not speaking only about salaries, but you need technique and also police to back you up. You need specialists, you need expertise. And maybe in Chisinau, for sure, there are many more possibilities to influence an investigation, to do it properly than you have it, for instance, in Cahul or in Mungheni or in Bălți even. So probably this may be an explanation of the performance. Also, I think in Chisinau there is a selection of the best. So people that have aspirations, that want to do more and perform more in their job. Maybe this can be an explanation. Also, the local level influence. I think it's much easier to exert influence over law enforcement in small cities and municipalities and communities than in Chisinau, which is the largest in Moldova. So all these factors combined maybe give us this perception that we have a better performance in Chisinau than in the rest of the country.
Yeah, we have some. Why am I asking you this? Because we have some examples. Two judges that had the cases of one prime minister and another political party leader. One is from Briceni and the other one is from Dondușeni. So they were judges at the north of the Republic of Moldova. So then, after a while, they got a job here in Chisinau.
It may be an explanation also of the salaries. Maybe it's a difference if we're talking about another level of the court. If the first or second level, maybe a difference in salary and also in their perception over the independence. I don't know. For a judge, independence, I think it's key, and we have to ensure all over the countries that judges enjoy independence in their decisions. Otherwise, they may be just influenced or be trapped in all sorts of local interests and also oligarchs or mafia-related organizations. So we need to secure that we have independent judges, but also professional ones. We need expertise and in the prosecution, but also in the courts. I think it's important for an asset recovery to be successful along the way, to have individuals that are very good professionals with integrity, having integrity, but first to be very good professional.
Now let's talk about the stolen assets. Mr. Pereira, how long it takes to recover them, and what is the optimum term?
That is really a key important question to understand in the context of asset recovery. And before I give you a figure or the average that it takes, I should highlight that, first of all, the asset recovery process is done in the majority of countries, Moldova included, within the context of a criminal procedure. That means that I need to identify a suspect. That means that I need to bring evidence, that I need to give rights to the defense. I need to afford them due process, like I would with any citizen or foreigner subject to any proceeding in Moldova. And that, of course, takes time. It normally takes much longer than anybody would like. To answer your question more directly, it depends on the complexity of the case. I think that if you have a more straightforward case, and you have specialized legislation like unexplained wealth orders, and unexplained wealth orders are similar to illicit enrichment in that you investigate and you try to establish what is legal assets and what are not legal assets, and then you provide the opportunity for the defense to provide any evidence or any information that would disprove what you are asserting. So that, for example, we take a Moldovan case that the UK had with unexplained wealth orders, and I believe that yielded a return of about 500,000 euros to Moldova. In that specific case, it took about 4 years for the UK authorities to investigate. That was a relatively simple case. The more extreme cases, we are likely talking about 30 to 35 years between initiation of the investigation and actual return of assets. So I think that the key question here, Vadim, and I don't know what you think, Radu, about this, but the key important thing to note is that asset recovery is not the recovery of assets. Asset recovery is a process, and the last part is the recovery of the asset. Because I need to afford due process, I need to identify the assets, I need to freeze the assets. So it is unrealistic, at least from my point of view, to say, for example, in the bank fraud scandal in Moldova, that was 2015, if I'm not mistaken, 2014, 2015, we have still not recovered anything. Well, my answer to you would be, well, that is a highly complex case, and it's only been 10 years. It is not outside the realm of what it takes for other jurisdictions to investigate.
Yeah, listening to you, I am concerning if Moldova will ever recover its money back.
Well, we can never predict. In a judgment, in a case, we can prepare ourselves, but ultimately the ultimate arbiter of a decision, of course, is a judge. the purpose or the function of law enforcement, of criminal investigation bodies, of course, is to identify assets and seek to freeze them. And the purpose of the prosecutor is, of course, to prosecute the suspects and seek to confiscate those assets. Do I think that there is the ability in Moldova to progress with that case? I think there is the possibility. I have never been privy to any information regarding that case. I should perhaps make that very clear to you, Vadim. But what does concern me about that case is if a criminal investigation has been initiated, and my understanding is that it has a financial investigation also been initiated? Because the longer it takes to start that investigation vis-a-vis the facts, the harder it becomes to identify those assets, because you are giving more time and more opportunity for suspects to hide their assets. So I do think that there is expertise. I do think that there is capabilities in Moldova to do that, but I would not be able to answer regarding events that may have happened between 2014 and 2020, 2021, whether there was a strong attempt to conduct the criminal and the financial investigation.
What would be the optimal term to recover the stolen assets?
I think all Pedro mentioned, it's fully valuable and applicable. We need due process. We need time for the investigation and for identifying assets. I think an optimal time would be up to 5 years. I think it is something that is manageable, and we can have this expectation, and this expectation be in line, I think, with what we can really achieve. I'm not a fan of the 20-30 year cases. I think the longer it takes, the results the final result will be unpredictable, at least, if not a disaster, because the longer you postpone seizing assets, you will not find them in the end. So I think for a good asset recovery mechanism and process, you need the crime to be investigated as soon as possible from the moment it took place. So I'm a fan of due process, but in the same time, I think we need efficiency, and we need law enforcement to have the capacity to investigate in proper time. In court, it may take up to, I don't know, 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, but for the recovery of assets, as Pedro said, in the end, we need that the seizing of assets is done in much shorter period of time than the time it takes a court maybe to have this case finalized.
Is Moldova ready to go through all these steps that Mr. Pereira mentioned?
I think Moldova has good institutions, good legal framework, professionals. I think in the judiciary and in law enforcement. I don't think it's a problem of legislation. I don't think it's a problem of human resources. I think there are capable individuals in Moldova able to do this. Also, I think there is a need from citizens and a push from citizens in the right direction. I think Moldova needs some fine-tuning and also some political stability, in the sense that politicians agree that technical stuff should remain to technical persons. Trying to interfere into the judiciary would would not have a good effect over the performance. So trying to influence investigations or trying to influence judges and trying to politically motivate reforms that are not in line with the international standards, I think this will send the wrong message. And I think Moldova is vulnerable from this point of view.
I was asking you about the process map and why it is necessarily talking about the recovery.
Okay, so Radu and I, we've started with the support of Soros Foundation Moldova, a process map, so an attempt to visualize the entire asset recovery system of Moldova, meaning who are the actors involved, what are their roles, what does the law or the regulation or the policy say that they can do or that they should do, and then try to map from beginning, so from identification all the way to the end, to the confiscation and the return of the assets. And in doing that, the idea is to create a map so we can identify the strengths that the system has, but also the opportunities that the system has to improve. Why this is so important is something that Radu just mentioned now on his response to your last question. We have to let the operational team, so the criminal investigation bodies and the prosecutors, start working, start operating the system, start identifying what the issues are and raising these issues with decision makers so that they can then create the necessary policies and create or amend the laws as has been necessary.
I want to say something because Pedro touched on a very important issue here with the mapping. I think it's important, this mapping, for all the institutions involved, all the agencies involved, because you see, each one has a limited competence from point A to point B or from point D to point E, and they don't see the whole picture. They don't see themselves as a part of this system and their contribution to be extremely important. Because in this chain, if something is broken, then the chain is broken, then the results are not those that we expect to be. So everybody should understand, I have this limited competence, but with this limited competence, I have a very important contribution. Without my contribution, all the work before me, all that my colleagues struggle to do will be in vain. So I need to be professional. I have to continue this because otherwise I don't care. I don't know what was before me. I don't know what will be after me. So I don't see myself as important. I don't understand really my role. I think that I also have other competencies because it's not only asset recovery in the world. Agencies have other important competencies. And they say, I don't understand this one. Leave it as it is. I will not involve too much resources in this. And this is a risk. And this process maps shows everybody that all of them are important, that all their roles are important, and they intervene in the process in some point of time or the other. But they have a common understanding of the process. They see how it begins, they see how it ends, they see the value to society.
Do they use it in Moldova?
We developed, Pedro, myself, with the support of Soros Foundation in Moldova, also in partnership with RB, in partnership with CNA. We all worked and with the agencies, because we had interviews with all the agencies involved. So we all worked. It was a common effort to have this map, to develop this map.
So, Mr. Pereira, the result of your work with of RB work should be the success to recover money back. Does this success mean only to get the money back, in your opinion?
Absolutely not. I think that we need, or I don't think, my sincere opinion here is that we need to have objective criteria indicating the small successes that you have on each stage of the asset recovery process. If I've just told you that in a best case scenario, an asset recovery case is taking 4 years, and in the worst case scenario, it's taking 35 years, I cannot possibly hold everyone to the standard of why have you not recovered my money. I think that we need to have a very solid discussion to establish indicators, objective indicators, so that we can remove the discussion from a politicized environment into an operational environment. Because otherwise, and this has happened in many other countries, my own included, you do not set up these indicators, and you will basically have one government blaming the other government, blaming the next government that not enough has been made and no money has been returned, but in fact there never was a policy. So how can you even start having that conversation? So I do think that the best way forward to be able to determine what success is to first have a real important and hard discussion as to what the indicators should be, meaning are parallel financial investigations opened in relation to certain high-risk crimes? How many assets have been seized and how long have they been seized for? How long does it take from the investigation to the prosecution stage, and not just have you recovered the money, because otherwise that will simply not work.
I also think that establishing a set of performance indicators for the agencies involved and for each stage of the process, it's very important at this moment of time for Moldova, in order to professionalize the entire system. Indeed, it is hard because we see that there are many shortcomings or challenges, maybe trying each agency or institution to put pressure and to put the blame on the other. But each one has to look into their own yard and say, what are my obligations? Because, for instance, parallel financial investigation is not only the duty of RB. RB does it to cover somehow and to help the other prosecution, the anti-corruption prosecution, the organized crime prosecution, the territorial prosecutions maybe. But parallel financial investigation should be the standard for all the agencies, for all the prosecutions. So they should have their own indicators regarding this aspect. So it's not like we don't have any assets identified because it's not our job at the anti-corruption or the organized crime or the territorial prosecution is the job of RB. This is not what would mean performance indicators, is that we had complex cases and we needed RB to cover that complex cases, but apart from that, we do our own parallel financial investigation. We have our own staff, we have our own competencies, and we have this kind of results. And taking ownership by all these agencies, I think it's a good step forward. Everybody saying it's not my blame, because it's not a matter of blame here. It's a matter of taking responsibility and leadership, and each institution should have this. Okay, I understand my responsibilities, I know that I have to do this, RB may be helping me, but I understand my responsibilities and my indicators is as such. I will try to do in most of my cases the parallel financial investigation and have maybe a threshold or some criteria to send to RB some cases. Also, it's up to me to have this investigation sooner, not to have that period of times where nothing happens. It is up to me to prioritize cases, to have maybe as a chief prosecutor of the anti-corruption and of organized crime, an internal organization to have this kind of priority and to speed up the process. In the same time respecting all the rights of the individuals. So establishing performance indicators is not something that an external consultant drafts and send to you and you say yes. You have to take ownership. And I think we need all the agencies to be involved in the process of taking ownership and leadership in establishing their indicators. Foreign consultancy may help, but without ownership, I think it will be just a dual exercise.
There needs to be local ownership of that process. There needs to be a discussion amongst those institutions. And also, and this is where again the process map comes to help, because it's clearer for them again in that chain what their responsibilities are and how they are supporting each other, and it becomes hopefully a little bit easier when they sit down and discuss that together to identify what should be the ideal indicators in that regard.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing with us your experience today.
Thank you.
Thank you.